Hello again, David.
Good morning. Or
Oh, thanks for joining.
no problem.
Hi, Steve. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
How are you?
Doing well.
All right, be honest. Is that orange juice or screwdriver?
It's orange juice.
Yeah, says you.
I'll save the screwdriver for tonight. I can't
All
drink
right.
coffee anymore, so orange juice is my thing.
Uh, yeah, I've given up alcohol nearly completely. I no longer like the way it makes me feel. And I
The
don't have to be social anymore because I work from home.
well, that's good. The alcohol certainly helps being social for an engineer. Um, in my case, I went deaf, and they took away sugar, caffeine, alcohol, and salt out of my diet. And they've given me back sugar and alcohol, but they've not given me back caffeine or salt. And I have
Oh,
to say the caffeine is the worst of that list by far.
really?
Yeah, that hurts not having caffeine.
No, I'm sorry to hear that.
I can live without alcohol. I can't live without caffeine.
You can cheat and drink tea. Apparently, it has a lot of caffeine.
I do
Don't
decaf.
tell them.
I do the herbal.
All right, we're 3 minutes in. We have
Okay.
a lot to cover. I will
We said we were going to
not.
make us work today, so
There's going to be a work day. We'll do what we can with what we got. So hopefully more people will join. But apparently the meeting invite, when I click on the link, it just puts up a blank window. I do not know why. So I had to actually manually enter the meeting ID and the passcode to join. Not sure what's going on there.
did not have that problem. I
Hmm.
just clicked on the link.
Okay. All right. So let's see. I'm going to share my screen and then we're going to. Oh, actually, before I do, and I'm actually hoping that somebody from the consortium leadership, like Sam or Mike or Dan, would join. I wanted to ask about the shared responsibility model around confidential. Like, I actually don't know what the current state of that is, other than I know we need it.
The that and the your comments about the confidential compute intro document, we wrote that back in 2020, 2019,
Hmm.
must be 2020, at the TAC. And yeah, it was pretty much a SGX focused document at the time,
Hmm.
um, with
Yeah,
a little bit of ARM flavor in it, and definitely needs an update.
absolutely. Yeah, I think we need like a biannual update at the rate everything's changing. Okay, so I will table the question of shared responsibility until we have more people with knowledge. I'm going to share my screen right now, and we're going to jump right into the verifier governance. I did some edits. So yesterday we received some really phenomenal feedback. Um, I don't know, David, did you feel I was combative in that meeting? I didn't think so, but I felt I was sort of, a little bit at loggerheads with a couple of folks.
No, but I was probably a little over the top in the meeting, I would say.
Okay.
Looking at it afterwards, I was like, probably a little bit much.
Well,
Um,
I mean, we're passionate about finding the truth as engineers are, so, I thought overall it went well.
yeah,
Is
Okay.
this in the
being a little
attestation SIG,
volatile.
I presume?
Yes, yes. Hi, Nikolai. That was in the attestation series. Yeah, basically, we need to get the attestation SIG to approve the verifier governance, and there are lots of solid people who are opinionated in that. So, we're literally going line by line through everything. So that's good. I think
Good.
the quality will be improved as a result. So, uh, let's see.
But just a quick question. So, how do you see the process going forward? Do we need to just keep convincing them until they give up, or is there some
Well, that's
point
certainly
when this
one way of doing
converges?
it. I cannot think of a better one. I think we'll be working on the document in this body, and then when we feel we have another version that address the comments that we received, we're going to go again, and eventually we'll be at a point where they will say, okay, this is good. I guess what I'm hoping for is a little bit more offline collaboration, because the hour every 2 weeks, given everything else that the station SIG needs to do, is like hoarding the time.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I
Hi,
see.
Janita, you're
But
new here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, sure. I was at the last meeting, 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
Uh,
I wasn't, so.
yeah, no worries. So yeah, I'm an Intel employee and I work in security governance. So they asked me to participate here as part of uh, my general role at Intel, in addition
Mhm.
to what I do.
Okay, sounds good. Well, welcome and nice to
Mhm.
meet you. All right. So let's see. The There is an entire new force in the forces section that I think needs to be added in response to the feedback we received yesterday. And I just added it so you can see on my screen here that it's trust and verifier. And a couple of comments were made. One is that if we care that and this is compressing an hour-long discussion into effectively, it's a TLDR. If we care that the evidence in attestation is not disclosed to a malicious party, the tenant needs to basically authenticate the verifier, much like, you authenticate your bank before you go put in your password or before you, figure out how much money you have or attempt to trade stocks or whatever. So another comment was made that we should probably know that the verifier is running, the code that is expected to be running, right? And then I added to that my own usual addition. It needs to be just not just expected code, but also unexpected configuration. So added that. And that's why I added this new section in the beginning called Trust and Verifier, which you can read for yourself. And if you're happy with the wording, I can accept the edit, or if you're not happy with the wording, we can wordsmith it a little
I'm a
more.
little confused about this from the point of view of how do we establish trust in the verifier? Because if you want to use attestation to trust the verifier, then you need another verifier to verify the verifier, and that problem goes on
Okay.
forever. Then you've got the problem.
That's a fair
I
observation.
yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
wanted to say, like, I would also like, I had the same thought, but then I thought, like, maybe this is done through non-technical means or somehow offline, or
It
maybe
is
through a combination of technical and non-technical, but offline, so that all the tenant needs is to just contact the right verifier. That
absolutely.
would simplify
And
things.
let me put it in the context of how it's done in the cloud controls matrix in the CSA. There are control specifications, right? And they say, we're after the following results, right? And then there are implementation guidelines that say, well, in order to achieve these results, you can do the following things. It doesn't have to be one thing, it could be a menu of choices. So we can certainly hint at some ways of achieving the stated goal, but we don't need to specify by which means it's achieved, right? So I do not believe that the governance patterns that we produce, should dictate any sort of implementation. And again, feel free to challenge me on that idea. But I can think of a couple of ways. For instance, we can have a secure boot where the measurements go into some sort of an append-only log. Maybe they are, stored in a vault somewhere. Like that's what the bank does with email. Every email I send actually goes off and stored in an IBM vault somewhere. And with the moment it gets deposited into that vault, there is no way we can get it out. But if it's subpoenaed, there it is. You can read it, you just can't, you can modify it. And this could be that. It could be, could be some sort of a blockchain. It could be, attestation done and results stored somewhere. Or it may be an accept risk type of thing where, well, we trust, Amazon verifier or Azure verifier, and that's just if they mess with us, it's a risk we accepted. Now, I wouldn't recommend it, but that's not my decision. So, so again, this is not a normative section. This is the forces section. Then we can look into how to formalize this. So let's first, do you see any issues with what's written here before we get into solution section?
So I don't have any issue with that. My issue was with the how, not the what.
Okay, so let's then move into solution section for this and see if it
Well,
matches. Yeah.
we can keep running through the document and catch the highlights as they go through the
Well,
document.
this is what I'm thinking here, Steve. If we don't like the solutions, we may need to come back and reword this, and I don't want to accept that change. Hi, Mari.
Just a quick comment
Hi,
about
guys.
the wording. So I'm considering maybe we could make it somehow more, let's say, direct, similar to the other points. Because in this right now it says like a special set of considerations apply, but that's like, yeah, as if like they apply in general. Instead, we could say like that the tenant should insure instead of which is insuring. Do you see my point? Like it seems
Okay,
like they're
so
not
how
really
about I
actionable.
say
It's
the
not clear
tenant
who.
should
Yeah.
insure. But
Yes,
but
yes,
that's the
what I mean.
thing. That's the thing. The tenant may not be able to ensure that the verifier is properly administered.
Okay, but then who care? But I would say that the tenant cares about it, so the tenant should insure. But
The tenant cares, but the tenant may not be able to insure it. The auditor of the verifier may insure it. So, okay, I'll give you an example. There is
yeah, I see the point. That the tenant will not be the one like doing the checks and so on. Or maybe we could say the tenant should ensure that the verifier has been verified
tenant-
somehow.
well, the tenant, we can say the tenant cares.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a
If
good
I say
word.
that,
The tenant
because
cares.
let me put it in the context of how it's done in other domains. So, we have I may get the details a little wrong, but in spirit, that's correct. We have a SOC 3 compliance requirement with our cloud service providers. And that means that once a year, we will test that our cloud service provider is satisfying certain requirements. And that is done perhaps by contacting the cloud service provider's auditor. Right. And it's kind of a checkbox, but it's also something that will say, yes, we took due diligence to ensure, perhaps by hiring an auditor or getting an auditor's report from, I don't know, Azure, that they are, in fact, in compliance with whatever SOC 3 requirement.
Yeah.
And this
so
may be a similar thing. So we care
Yeah.
that they do it right, but we're not we're not there monitoring them.
I like the word care. I think it's better than like just saying that special considerations apply or something applies. It applies is a bit too abstract. Cares is better. And now there's a subject that cares.
And I like where you're going with this, Mark, because this leads up to the fact that you don't have a recursive problem where the tenant has to verify. Whoever is concerned about the tenant needs to be concerned about the system and what trust guarantees exist against the verifier, but that's not the same thing as the trust or as the tenant actually doing the verification.
Yeah. Okay. So awesome.
Well, but
so we can, yeah.
Sorry, Mark. I think instead of having the entire second half of this paragraph, it might be better to say the tenant cares that they're talking to the correct verifier and that it's in a trustworthy state. Because after the meeting yesterday, I looked through things and I got the impression that this is really a high level requirement stuff. Right? What it means to trust the system comes down to like what you said with, let's say, the Cloud Security Alliance's set of security controls with implementation guidelines, right? And what it means to trust the verifier may differ. Like, for example, let's say you're a very, hush-hush US government entity, and you really do care about verifying the specific attestation evidence, right? You want to know that you have a measurement of the specific binary that's running the verifier on the host, and that's what it means for it to be trustworthy for you. So
Well,
to say we know we're running the right code or we're properly maintained or anything like that sounds like the security controls, which are at the second level document that we were discussing yesterday, not really a document of this level, which is the high level guarantee of I know I'm talking to who I'm supposed to talk to, and they've given me some assurance that they're in a trustworthy state somehow.
yeah. And this is, I think I like what you said, and this is why I put everything under EG. Because that basically says, well, for instance,
Okay.
this may mean the following thing, but I still wanted to keep that, verbiage alive. Otherwise, it becomes sub to interpretation. What's a trustworthy state? And then they have to reconstruct it again.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't want to accept this change just yet because I want to go through the rest and see if we need to come back and revisit. Okay.
Yep.
Here, by the way, I added a little that in the multi-tenant verifier, tenants present security and availability threats to the peers. So just I think it's especially because we mentioned noisy neighbor. And this is now, again, new number one, because we're now talking about trust and verifier. And here we're talking about established via the following mechanisms. And again, let's take it in the spirit of what we just discussed, right? So it's running correct code, properly configured, properly administered, running correct policies. And by the way, we may want to consider, because we do this later on, the should, must, may language on all of the sub-bullets. And I haven't done that yet.
So, so Mark, just real quick, what if I just want to understand how you see this fits. So what if I have to go to a Microsoft site to get the hash of a binary to verify that I'm talking to the right I'm trying to verify something else. I want to verify I'm talking to the right workload.
Mhm.
But I need Microsoft. They're like the verifier, right?
Mhm.
And I don't know if I just know that I have a URL and that's it.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about that. The one thing that comes to mind is your verifier is ultimately workload. And that workload will have an identity. And once in this other working group that I'm starting now, we figure out how to do workload identity. It's not a big stretch to say that I will have some sort of a root of trust, and that root of trust will be able to tell me whether the verifier workload identity is the one that I would like to participate in or in a conversation with for purposes of my attestation. Now, not saying that's the way to do it. It may be that Microsoft is simply sending me a signed statement saying behind this URL, behind this TLS or whatever X509 certificate is the workload with the following hashes. And it's a contractual obligation, and perhaps with some monetary penalties if they lie. That could be another way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And who is to say how to do it? We can, those are implementation guidelines. We should not be going down. We should be talking about the security properties we'd like to achieve, not the means of achieving them.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that. I think this is a really great supply chain root of trust concept. And I think if we can pull it off, we're gonna really improve the industry big time.
That's my hope as well. Like, again, with this working group, I really believe that we're at the forefront of how these things ought to be thought about, because there is a lot of imprecision out there.
Totally. And I've been hacking at my supply chain folks at MITRE, and I can't get them on this bandwagon. I can't get them on this bandwagon, but as soon as we come up with this paper, I'm going to show them.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So on 1A, I'm proposing the following change right now before I type it in, that a tenant should know which verifier to contact. And then each should, by the way, has this little asterisk here that I can now put later into this, so this is should A, and I would add another one, right? And then we can basically say, this should only applies if you care that you're not sending your attestation results to the wrong verifier. But I don't want to leave these as without a shooter a must.
Yeah. So I actually think one should be a must. Solely because the fact that it's not an issue of whether or not you care if your evidence is being leaked to an inappropriate verifier. It's an issue of whether or not you could trust the result that's being given back from the verifier. Because ideally, you're using a remote verifier because you don't want to have to handle the data and the policies and the reference manifests and the endorsements and make a decision based on that, right? So you need to be able to trust the decision coming back to you. And the only way you can trust the decision coming back to you is if you know you're giving it to the right person in the first place, right?
Let me challenge that
Okay.
on a couple of grounds. The attestation results are not trusted by the attester usually. The attestation results are trusted by whatever relying party or identity provider you present them later. And if you get bogus attestation results, it's a dead end. That's one challenge. The second challenge is what I would call the man in the cave scenario, or maybe there are other. And there are some situations where your system is running completely disconnected and your network is tightly segmented, and you absolutely know that you're configured for this IP address. When you go there, the verifier is going to be there. Who is to say on my end that you absolutely have to attest your verifier or authenticate your verifier? It's a should. It's a should if you care about particular outcomes.
Okay.
Right.
I would say though that the idea that air gap networks are secure is not a sound. Most people do not assume an air gap network, which is what you're talking about there, is an actual secure environment.
Well, it's not up to us to decide that, right? I mean, yeah, as a security geek, I hear you. I would like to build, the most secure thing. But I also realize that people have exceptions, and there are some things, like for instance, there are musts in this document. For instance, you must maintain integrity of your policies. It's never okay to have your policy be changed and you don't know which policy runs. I cannot imagine a situation where that's the case. Or if your signing key is leaked, you must rotate it. There is no two ways about it. But whether you are, doing an authentication of your verifier, yeah, I can see it go both ways.
The problem I have with getting a attestation report from your verifier is you then that's evidence that's coming to you and you have to go verify that evidence somehow. And so from a
But you always do, right? Somebody's going to look at these attestation results, and if they're bogus, you don't get the cookie. The cookie is in a locked jar.
Right, but if you wanted to verify your verifier, right? So the verifier gives you a hash. How are you going to verify that hash? You verify that hash by introducing a second root of trust, right? So you start with the root of trust with Intel, right? Intel is signed the CPU, the attestation report that I get from the CPU is signed by the CPU. I can verify that with a 509 certificate. And then I go connect to a attestation verifier. It gives me an attestation report. Maybe I knew what the measurements were of the verifier that I was going to trust ahead of time because that was embedded into my code. I then have to do a remote attestation, same 509 process to verify that that report is correct, right? So that hasn't introduced a new root of trust, but if you want to trust that system, you got to step out of the system, right? So this is where I like the notion you had, Mark, that the controls on the verifier, because it's in the position of ultimately saying whether the remote attestation is valid or not. You kind of got to step out, you got to go meta to establish trust in it. This is the HSM problem, right? We put our keys in an HSM. What guarantees do we have? Ultimately, it comes down to a set of legal guarantees and certificates that came from the manufacturer. Who am I trusting? And understanding that chain of custody, et cetera.
Your roots of trust and your chains of trust are different depending on which party is engaged at any particular point in the swim lane diagram. So let me speak about it this way. I am on the attester. I received a quote from my CPU signed by effectively a certificate issued by Intel. I don't have to trust Intel at this point in time. On the attester, the Intel is not in my root of trust.
Correct.
Now I went and I sent this quote up to the verifier. The verifier has to have Intel in its root of trust because otherwise it has no way of verifying that quote. Now the attester went and signed the attestation result back to the attester. The attester is not like for it. The signing key of the verifier is not necessarily in its roots of trust because it may have received it from a bogus verifier, and so far nothing bad has happened. Now the attester goes and takes the attestation results and sends them up to the relying party or to an IDP. And the IDP now thinks that for the IDP, the Intel is not in the root of trust, but the verifier is.
Correct.
Right? And this is where I'm saying it's a should. Why do I care to authenticate my verifier? Well, I care to authenticate my verifier in one of two cases. In one case, I do not want to share my evidence with the wrong party because I'm afraid it might leak and disclose that I'm running a vulnerability. In the other case, I'm directly using the results of attestation, and if I trust them, then I may do something locally on the same machine, right? But if none of those two conditions apply, and in most cases they actually don't, then I am I don't actually need. I can send my that attestation dance over plain text channel for all I care.
But if that's
Right,
the
so-
question, why are you doing attestation? If you don't care whether your evidence is kept secret or that you're even talking to the right person,
In that case, this is why I care. I care that if if there is a man in the middle and maybe they siphoned off my evidence. Okay, well, maybe I don't care that they discover that I'm running vulnerable code. That's up to me to decide if I care or not. And then I receive my attestation results. And what if they're tampered with? Well, it's a DOS attack if I cannot then go and access my relying party with those attestation results. Again, I may not care about that. But by the time attestation results get to the relying party, that's the part where I really care that what happens after that point is secure. None of that has to do with the trust in the verifier by the attester.
yeah, and most of the underlying technologies for confidential compute assume that denial of service is not part of the
Exactly.
threat model. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Right. So that's why I'm saying this is a should. So the tenant should know which verifier to contact. And then I'll put an asterisk, and all of that will be explained in the footnote.
Yeah, I think the swim lane diagram we should add in here as well.
Okay. If you want to do the honors by the next meeting and draw that, there is that, and there's another thing. Again, I'll put a pin on it. We should specify in a table. This also came up in the meeting yesterday, but maybe not well articulated. We should specify a list of assets that we care to protect here. And the list of assets would be the signing keys with which attestation results are signed, and the policies with that drive the execution of the verifier, and the code of the verifier. These are all assets that we care are kept in a secure state. And then we should have sort of a discussion and reference them. So we know, so swim lane diagram would help, and the table of assets would help.
Okay, can you
And-
mark them as to-dos somewhere? So that,
Absolutely, yes, I can. So, okay,
in
so
case I suddenly get bored, it's great to have some
Yes.
specific actions.
So I'm going to say should, and I'm going to put an asterisk on it because I will, again, that's going to be an edit that's done offline. I'm not going to bore you with it right now. So, okay, I'm going to just put this here.
Hey, what if we could bind enclave attestation to DNS records?
Okay,
Huh.
the first thought that jumped to mind was this seems like an implementation detail, but say more.
Oh, if there was you can verify a machine on a domain. What if I could, verify the workload association with that machine through a DNS search, DNS record search? That would
So
make finding and trusting a workload
Mhm.
much easier.
I love where you're going with this. I think this discussion belongs in the workload attestation working group. Let me explain why. In the workload working group, we'll be talking about what attributes constitute or what claims a workload can present. And there will be of two classes. There will be the claims around the workload itself, right? This is, this code has passed requirements for Department of Defense classification level 3. Like it's kind of an issuance policy or an XFINAT. That would be a workload claim. And then you can have storage systems that say only workloads that have been cleared to DoD level 3 get access or higher get access to this. So that would be one scenario. But another scenario would be in the workload identity, you may have some claims around the machine on which the workload runs. And that has to do with, for instance, the machine on which this workload runs is located in Germany, or the machine is subject to requirements of the following, I do not know, legal construct. And they're separate, but also during attestation, you probably need to establish both, and we'll need to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and by the way, the meeting on the initial meeting on workload identity is literally at the end of this meeting.
Okay.
So,
I want to make sure I get that invite.
Okay.
Yeah, can I get that too, Mark?
If you
Because
put
it's
your
not on
if
the
you
calendar.
put your email in the chat right now, I'll forward you the invite. It's not a recurring
Awesome.
invite yet. Okay. All right. So swim lane diagram. Listing all parties in the oral station dance involving the verifier. And then add a list of assets we seek to protect by governing the verifier. Okay, so we'll do that. We'll come back to that. Wait, why it somehow switched back to editing, and I want to do that under crap.
So one quick question,
Yeah.
Mark. Do you see the threats to those assets as being something that need to be in this document as well? Or is that something that would be in like the level 2 document where we start talking about controls as justification for specific controls?
I could go either way. Probably we need to discuss that separately.
Okay.
I don't want to make like rash judgments. Okay, so let's see. So the first one, 1A, is tenant should know which verifier to contact. The verifier is properly administering the verifier should or must. Like my instinct says must. I see no exceptions to that. Like why wouldn't you? And the way you do this may very well be, I have an armed guard and I have it in a cage, and the code is read-only. Like it's not dictating any kind of implementation approach. I cannot see a point of anybody running verifier and being laissez-faire with the code or config.
I very much believe the verifier ends up in us because you're using it to establish trust in your workloads. It has to be in a place that the overall system trusts it, and that definition of trust is up to the customer to ultimately define in my case. The person that's running the system that wants to do verification has to know that the verifier is a source of truth. So,
So in my mind, verifier is effectively a much more complex HSM. Like in the future, I see them being appliances certainly for high security cases. And the way, for instance, in Azure, I remember we had certain HSMs that, like a big bank, like Bank of America, I forget which, but one of them would actually bring a box into the data center, and it was sitting in a cage with video surveillance, and the only way to access it was like two people would have to be there with like physical keys or like something like that. It was a very, very complex ceremony for accessing the thing.
yeah,
Right.
which is, so I don't disagree, right? That's why we sell ours to a customer as software, and it's up to them to decide whether they want to run it in prem, whether they want to put it on a special box, whether they want to create ceremonies around with it. What do they want to do? Because it's in a special place. It's at the heart of the system. Um, and because all of the identity of the workloads is going to be sourced from that verifier, your trust in those identities is no better than your trust in the verifier.
Yeah. So, Maggie, then, do you have your consent to put must be properly administered here?
Yes.
Now, the
Properly
moment we say
administered is
that,
going
it's
to
not
be
just code and configuration, it's also administration. So
correct.
then we need to bring in this concept of, um, what do we say about the operator making changes to it?
So are we going to have a second document that has implementation guidelines, or do you want to try to put some of
I
that?
think we need separate implementation guidelines later for that would suggest ways of achieving various aspects of governance. It should not go here.
Yep, because for me, the next phrase, properly administered, is going to be dependent on the system you're using it in, and what JP decides versus some other bank decides versus some government decides. They may have different choices about what properly administered means, based on the system that they're using the verifier with.
So in the same vein, I would then put must be executing the most recent policy specified by intent.
Yep.
Or most current. Probably correct. More corrector. Okay.
Hey, Mark,
Yes.
I noticed in this section, we didn't capture part of the discussion yesterday about, we captured the part here where we're saying we're running the code we expect to run, but there was a second part of that where we were trying to capture something to do with the quality of that code that's being run. So you can assure to me all you want that the correct code is running in the enclave that's going to run the verifier. But if you have like zero secure development practices as a tenant, I might want to know that information to know that you're actually, writing a verifier that's worth
It's
while.
absolutely valid concern, and I think unless we go into implementation guidelines, it's captured by this word expected that I highlighted.
Yeah.
What caused me to expect that code to run is TBD.
I just think but I think there's an actual distinction between what I'm expecting to run there and the quality of what I'm expecting to run there. Those
Well,
I know we can't dictate to people how they need to develop their code, but
let me
we
joke
have
about that.
processes where we go about and like verify third-party dependencies we use. And part of my job as a security person at Intel is when someone comes to me and says, hey, we want to use this library, I go and I look at it and I say, well, it hasn't been updated in 6 years. It has 0 tests and it has 16 open issues with security issues.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the best choice for you. Right?
Absolutely. Well, like I expect when I walk into my garage to see my BMW, I actually don't expect it to be reliable. If I had that, I would have different set of expectations. I'd buy a different car. So,
But in this sentence, properly expected and secure are doing a lot of heavy lifting, and different different contexts, they may have different meanings. Mark, your example of, do you expect your BMW to run every day? You know, that's a great example. And for some customers, using ITA or MAA is going to be sufficient, even though they don't know what the code is. For some customers, that won't be sufficient. They're going to want to run their own code that they've inspected, and they know what the quality of the expected code is.
Well,
Yeah, so I agree that that I think with what I think you meant is that just having it expected should be enough, because the expectation is dependent on every tenant has their own definition of expected, and I don't think we should go into categories as quality of the code, because that is not measurable.
well, you
Or
may
at least
have
everyone will
policies.
have their own
You may
standards.
have
Yeah, of course,
policies
everyone
around
will
the
have their own
quality of the
policy.
code, right? So you may basically say it passed all our static analysis checks, it passed penetration testing. You know, who knows what controls you're going to have on that.
Yeah,
You
of
know.
course, but it's like just like we don't really know or have expectations, or in most cases, organizations don't have expectations how the certificate authorities that they rely on in their browsers, how are they maintained? Most organizations don't have insights into that. In the same way, they will not have insights into what code the verifier is running. So that's yeah, especially if it's an external verifier.
Well, I agree with you, but we also have standards that are being developed in the various software communities of where a project can assert its level of SDL practices, right? The Linux Foundation provides a framework for you as a project to say, we're meeting level 1, which means we're doing basic testing or whatever. We're meeting level 2, we have reproducible builds on everything, and we're running, certain static analysis tools against it. So even the Linux Foundation has a framework for an entity to be able to assert on its code base, these are the practices that we're engaging with for this code base, right?
I think it's a really good observation that the quality of the code may be in some people's expectations, may not be in other people's expectations. As we get to the implementation guides, I think there should be a lot of shoulds as opposed to musts, where we expand upon what does expected code, what does secure code, what does what was the final point we had in there? What was properly, what do those things mean in a practical sense?
Well, again, what it means in a practical sense will be left to implementation guidelines.
That's what I'm agreeing with.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see.
Sent you a message, Steve, in the chat.
Okay.
And by David and Mari, I forwarded you the invite for the workload identity meeting. So I don't have anything else right now that I think we can cover in the next 15 minutes. So if you want to maybe go over the existing comments, I think honestly have been sort of up for a couple hours working, so I probably need a break before the next meeting. So let me put this in the link in the chat, and I'm going to probably take a short break before my top of the hour.
I wanted to follow up on what we talked about 2 weeks ago. We discussed reviewing the GDPR paper written by Paul O'Neill, and that feedback. I noticed that, Mark, thank you for your feedback, but I didn't see any feedback from anyone else in the SIG. So I just wanted to confirm that people read it and they just didn't have feedback, or if they hadn't had a chance to read it.
I didn't have the chance to read it. Where can I find it?
Maybe can you drop the link into the chat?
Yeah, let me pull that up. 1 second. Where's the chat? That's the link that I have. Can you access it?
Yes, I can confirm I can access.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I reviewed that.
Yeah, so I was planning to go in and you know, consolidate the first round of feedback, but I only saw feedback from Mark, and I just wanted to confirm before I get too deep into making changes.
I did not review it. I will, I have some time this afternoon. I can take a crack at it.
Okay, and Nikolai?
Yeah, as I said, I did not review it, but I will do that. Well, it's evening here, so I'll do it tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't
All right,
think I'll
so
have time tonight.
for next meeting, let's do this GDPR review offline. We will come back to this. Hopefully there'll be some swim lanes and a list of assets. We need to wrap this up, throw it back over the wall to the attestation SIG. If we can get the text in good enough shape, you know, it's 2 weeks less a day for attestation SIG to reconsider it. You know, that would actually be ideal, move things along and not wait another month effectively until they can re-engage with this. And then we need to get into this thorny issue of break and inspect. And also the shared responsibility model. I think those are going to keep us busy for a little while. All right, I'm
Sounds
going
like
to
a good
disconnect
plan.
now.
I'm saying sounds like a good plan. I really hope we can. I mean, this document has been in progress since a while. I really hope we can.
Well, it is complex and it's improving, so you know
Yeah,
it's worth it. All right, thank you all very much. I will see you soon.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.